Let's get into it. Welcome back to Casuals Encounter, and joined as always by myself, Will at Casuals Corner MMA, and also Leo Cooper on all social platforms. The reason I feel a little bit on edge is because I've just had this first sip of this iced coffee that I've made, and I've got this terrible habit. I have no idea, honestly, no idea whatsoever, what a normal dose is for an iced coffee with ground coffee that I use.
There's never enough.
I've just been pouring heaps into the filter I've been using, and I've just been completely freeballing it. But
That's the
I'm
way.
starting to think I'm putting about 4x the amount in, to be perfectly honest.
Well, if you start shaking, then you know.
If I get the caffeine shakes.
Oh my god, yeah. I did that once when I was staying up for this is back in my early days of trying to stay up for UFC.
Your heydays.
I was just just cranking on the coffees, and I just started like I remember Cody Garbrandt was fighting. That was all I remember. I can't.
How many
remember
are we talking? How many are we talking?
Oh, I mean, it was like probably like 3 or 4. And it just
quite a lot though, actually.
And I sort of ended up sleeping, but then for like an hour, and then I woke up and I was just like absolutely shaking all over the game.
Disorientated.
Yeah.
The worst I've ever done. The worst I've ever done. I remember it so clearly. When I used to gym quite frequently, I used to go to the gym a lot. I used to be a proper sort of 18-year-old getting crackhead pre-workout, absolute crackhead pre-workout. And I used to just enjoy having it dry. And it was just a sort of sickly feeling. And then you get that nice adrenaline rush. And I never used to drink much caffeine or fizzy drinks or coffee or anything like that. So it used to always hit me. But you develop a sensitivity, right?
So I got it.
Yeah, you develop a sensitivity. And then, so you'd have to do more. And I remember one day, me and my friend had tons of it. And then we got to the gym and we was like, right, let's have an espresso. And then I was like, all right, let's just buy one of these little pre-workout shots between us. We'll share it, which had something outrageous in. We ended up working it out, and we had 13 espressos straight to the dome in one go, essentially. And looking back on it, that is terrifyingly scary.
Yeah,
and
I'm pretty
dangerous.
Good actually. I'm not. I've always kept to the same like I usually have like one a day. I've pretty much always been like that, maybe 2.
I never drank it before though, ever.
Oh, mine was back in school, mate. 3 periods. I did film studies. They turned the lights off, 3rd period. Shut the curtains, mate. It's a recipe for falling asleep. So I was like, right.
Yeah, that's so
I got to
true.
get on caffeine. So that was my entry. But yeah.
That's funny you say that. And this is a little bit of a side tangent. We'll get into the fights in a second. But there's so many times I've been in work situations, obviously not work situations which I've been passionate about or enjoy. And you go into a meeting, and I've had this numerous times I can remember. I went into this meeting in my job in London, market leading company, incredibly successful company, impressive people in what they do, right? And we've gone into this meeting, and it's one of those places which is set out, which is quite cool, and it's got vibe. You know what I mean? A little bit internship, like the film.
Yeah.
And it had beanbags, just like massive beanbags. And it's about 2-3 p.m. We've got this meeting.
No, you're falling asleep.
I've had my afternoon gym workout. I've had about 3,000, 4,000 calories at this point. So I was just eating a ridiculous amount of food. Yeah. And it's the afternoon. And there's this person just talking about a very monotonous topic of very, very niche, boring marketing, like jargon. And I couldn't help but you just drift off. But anyway, we're getting way off it.
I was gonna say, speaking of marketing, I think Sean Strickland is probably he's doing a good job of it, isn't he?
That's a great segue.
I'm getting better. I have to say, if he ever listens to this episode, I got to formally apologise because I'm now a fan of Sean Strickland.
Wow.
I take it all back. He's too.
What do you take back though?
I mean, I wouldn't say. I would say I never said he was a bad fight. I just said he was quite boring. And I have to say, when I was watching that fight last night, I was thinking exactly what you said last week. You hit the nail on the head about him putting on a absolute statement clinic and getting a finish. And I have to say, I have to concede you were right on the money there. So yeah,
I feel so smug right now. I can't even contain this feeling of this. I'm just sitting here like, I don't know what to do with my facial expressions.
Yeah, but yeah, no, his personality is as much of how insane some of the things he says. He's just too infectious not to enjoy watching and listening to. So I have to concede that video of him riding home on the bike, like straight out like Top Gun or something. Like, yeah, I have to give him credit. It was a really good performance. Actually, we want to actually talk specifics about the actual fighting performance. He started off quite passive, but that's kind of
Mm.
Strickland is. He's patient, and I was like, that's what I thought. Okay, maybe I was right. He's gonna lead the dance for 25 minutes, sort of find his reads and start picking him off. But he absolutely turned up the pace. He just went into another gear, and it was just after that first round. It was, he was serious. He was serious. He came in there with, a goal, and that was to get that finish. And it was venomous. Just pushing him against the cage and just unloading those combinations. It's beautiful. Yeah, I was very impressed. I gotta say, very impressed.
The thing I think's very interesting about what Sean Strickland said is he came out in the post-fight press conference and he said the reason why some of his performances have looked like that is because when you're fighting for win bonuses and you're 2-3 rounds up, you do just play it safe and you do sort of at times coast to victories or not take risks because you're doubling your pay essentially. And when you're Sean Strickland and you're probably earning, let's just guess $100,000, another $100,000 is a lot of money. And I've heard him speaking before fights about how he wanted to buy this car or this motorbike. And then he put quite a funny but true video up of him going to the parking lot after he'd lost his fight and picking up an absolute heap of crap and saying, well, this is all I can afford now. But as funny as that was, there is truth to it. And this fight, he got played a flat fee, no win bonus. And he went out there and he fought like that because that's what he does in sparring. And people say, oh, why doesn't he do that in fights? Well, it's a very different situation.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have that purse on the line and you have double your pay on the line. So if you're someone like Strickland, that usually has the ability to just outwork, outpace, outprod your opponent and double your money, you're probably going to do that without taking too much risk. So it was brilliant to see him take that risk because I knew he always could. And like I said last week, I did believe this was just way too big of a step for anyone, really, not just a bus. But when you're coming into the UFC, there's a certain level of fighter, there's a certain level of caliber outside the top 15 and then the 15 and the top 5. And then you have people like Sean Strickland, who is forged in fire daily. So you have to come with one of two things to beat Sean Strickland. You have to become very, very highly skilled and tuned in to one thing, whether that's exceptional striking, but you also have to have the conditioning to go with that, because if you can't push a pace for 5 rounds, you will be worn down and drowned. And someone put on Twitter about how
I was literally about to say the same thing. I think we're talking about the same tweet here.
Yeah, someone put on Twitter, there was a girl that I follow, she said a bus started nicely, the kicks were nice, which they were, and it was a good investment actually, but he just came out so explosive, a little bit of immaturity, even though he is a veteran in the game. He just thought he was going to come out and blow Sean Strickland away, and that's the issue people have when they watch him, because he does have his chin up. He does have a very unassuming style. He doesn't hit that hard, you know? And then you get in there, and he's very tricky, and he's very
suddenly
awkward.
You're just getting hit and hit.
And your head's just getting snapped back, and all of a sudden you're in the third round, you're busted and bruised, and he's wearing at you and shouting at you, and you're thinking, he's not really going anywhere. I'm going to have to knock him out, and my arms are flat. You know, so I think that was super impressive from Sean Strickland. What do you think? Title fight next?
Nah, a little bit early. I think one more. I think if he...
Why, though? Why?
I suppose, to be fair, I mean, I think when you look, you might be right when
What's
you look at the
the first thing you said to me when we opened this up? Marketing.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? That's what the UFC is. It's marketing, and they've got that narrative there with Izzy. They've got that press conference material.
Maybe you're right.
They've got an absolute storm. And I've been saying for a very long time now, I see in my analytics, I see who performs well, I see who people care about, and I see who people engage with. And Sean Strickland is always at the top of that list somewhere. And now that he's had impressive performances with it, and now that he's winning a ton of fans over, and now that he's getting knockouts, I mean, you have to book that fight with Izzy if Rob Whittaker beats Dricus du Plessis. Change my mind.
You think so?
100%. 100%. It's a PR game. It's an entertainment business.
Is. I think I'm thinking from a fight perspective.
You have to make that fight when it's the biggest fight it can possibly be. He's got a
No, you're
nice bit
right.
of
You're absolutely
momentum.
right.
He's got new fans. Izzy needs new blood. This is what they need to do.
Yeah. You know what? I think if we're talking realistically, if we're putting ourselves in the shoes of like Dana
Licking
and all
his
those, all the
lips.
brass, of course, it's Strickland, isn't it? Really. I mean, you have to admit the press conferences would be that would be something. Did you see? I can't. You might have posted it on your socials, but there was that clip of him just going on a tirade in the pre-fight presser, just rambling about something about women belonging in the kitchen or something. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
I think the reporter says have you ever thought about going to therapy, Sean? And he
Yeah,
just says why. He's like he doesn't even have any sort of idea. But he's wild. But I have to give him the respect. If we're talking about in the cage strictly, he's earned it. He's earned my respect absolutely, and obviously my respect means nothing. He doesn't care about anyone thinks, let alone me. But I'd like, in a way, I'd almost like to see him do well. I never thought I'd be saying that.
The
But here we
last
are.
thing I'll say on this, and then we'll move on to the co-main, because there was a very impressive performance. The last thing I'll say on
Yes.
this is the funniest thing with Sean Strickland is he's having this monumental shift in fans' eyes, because a lot of people saw him as this rough, sort of chavvy in England and
Yes.
in America. I don't know what you call that, redneck
White
maybe.
trash. He
Yeah,
said it
white
himself,
trash,
actually.
trailer trash.
I didn't
That's
say that. Yeah, one of those.
chav and trailer trash
He
are
said it, not
interchangeable.
us. I'm
No,
just gonna
we
say that
also
now
said it.
as a
He said it.
disclaimer.
He said
He
it
said it first.
categorically, and it's hard not
Yes.
to agree with him with some of the ways he goes about things.
Very
But
true.
that's what's so endearing in a way about him. And people get very upset because they don't like everything he says. And guess what? You're not going to. And I don't think anyone does. And if you do, that's a big red flag. But you can't just agree and nod along with everything. But you have to commend him for the fact that he is grabbing attention and he's performing to back it up. And what I was going to say is he's having this shift where people saw him as this trailer trash, boring fighter, just cannon fodder, essentially, for
That's
up
the
and
one. Yeah.
comers. And now he's on this trajectory almost where we're seeing old promos with long, luscious hair. He's in leather jackets
Yeah.
riding bikes. He's like
Yeah.
this bad boy of MMA. He's had
It's weird.
outlandish
I
things,
think
and I don't know
I
what's
think the
happening.
one thing I think the one thing I will say is he's a unique case, and the reason he does so well is because you get so many people. Obviously, the fight game is it's all about showmanship, and it's half the work is outside the cage rather than in. But I think that the reason why he does so well and he's so popular is because he's not putting on an act. It's just him, and his personality is that rogue and infectious,
True,
and it just works as it is. He doesn't need to pretend
true.
to be somebody else. And not to say that doesn't work in itself, but it's a unique case where he is his unique personality, and that just shines through. And he doesn't need to try.
I do think with him that, like anyone, there's an Instagram version, right? I always think of, if
Yeah,
anyone watching this knows James Smith. If you listen to James Smith on longer form podcasts, he's a
I think I
online fitness
recognize.
person if anyone doesn't
Yeah,
know him. But he's very calm, he's very understanding, he's very happy to have conversation and be up for conflicting ideas in a very relaxed way. On Instagram, completely different person, really. And I'm not saying Sean Strickland is such a contrasted person. He's quite similar across. But what I mean is when you're on Instagram, you're in a very, very big room and you have a very small piece of attention that you can grab other people's attention with. So you have to say crazy things at times. So I don't think that is inauthentic. I just think it's enhanced up 100 levels. Because when you see him a little bit more behind the scenes, he is a little bit more subdued, but obviously
yeah,
still wacky. But when you see it on the camera, it's just turned up a few levels. And the
yeah. But it's
funny,
not someone else, isn't it?
no, no,
It's
not
still
at all.
him, and
Yeah,
that's why it
no,
works. Yeah,
it's definitely still him. But it, he's taken, yeah, Sean Strickland has taken a very funny turn, and I'm quite happy to just sit back and watch it all happen
enjoy
because
it. Yeah,
yeah, a lot of people are very
absolutely.
uptight about it and they're very angry
Yeah,
about it, and that's what makes it sort of brilliant, I think.
exactly. Realistically, if you think about it, would the UFC be less entertaining with or without him? And I think you can figure out the answer to that pretty easily. You know, It's like it doesn't matter how controversial he is, he's entertaining, and that's kind of what you want sometimes.
The thing I was thinking that I forgot to say that I just was going to end on is the funniest thing about the whole ordeal is he got on the mic and he was doing really well. He was actually kind of crushing it. He was quite quick. He was quite witty. He was quite funny. And I thought he hasn't said anything too crazy. And I thought he's nailing this. And then he goes on. He proceeds to say, America, America, America. And I thought, you have just nailed this speech in terms of reaching an American audience, because all he said for about a minute was, I love America, I love America,
country.
on repeat. And I just thought in my head, this is a Simpsons episode off by half.
I know, right?
And it's when they have the election and he's just going, America, 9/11. No, and they're just going, yeah! That's what it felt like when the crowd's there just screaming for him. And I was thinking this is brilliant. But
he's
anyway,
wild.
Sean Strickland, character in Too Long Didn't Read terms.
Respect, Sean.
Someone in the coal main who is also turning into a bit of a character, who's been calling Paddy Pimblett's name out, who's been calling Tony Ferguson's name out for a very long time. And people didn't sit back and question it because people didn't really talk about him. And he's on a 9-fight win streak now, and the performance from Grant Dawson yesterday against Damir Ismagulov, for those who don't know, a lot of people picked him to become a future champion or at least be in a top 5 very, very soon. He absolutely dominated him.
Yeah, it was. I gotta say, again, we know not to use MMA mouth, but I'm gonna use it here shamelessly. When Ismagulov put up such a, obviously he didn't win, but he put up such a competitive fight, and we talked about this last week against Arman Saruki, and it's like, he's cream of the crop, and if you can hang with him, you can probably hang with the best. But he got made to look like a child the whole 3 rounds. Really, it was he had the body triangle and he had his arm trapped as well. It was just kind of like, wow, very, very
big
dominant from Grant. Yeah, exactly. It's like an older sibling just bullying. Like it was kind of shocking. I got to say, it surprised me because, again, it's sort of the way we talked about Brendan Allen last week as well. Grant Dawson, obviously, they're kind of just gone under the radar a little bit. Him even more so, I think, because he hasn't fought in a while, hasn't he? I could be wrong there, but he's not a familiar name to most people, despite the fact he's done so well. And I think that's a good platform to him to go. He's in the top 15. He's really breaking through. Beating a guy like Ismagulov, that's a real good platform to build off of, and hopefully get as a good opponent. I'm not sure who maybe. I mean, I think the way you're talking about Paddy Pimblett and Tony Ferguson, I think that's not even close, is it? Really?
I'm gonna start off by saying that to do that to Damir Ismagulov in the wrestling department, he didn't just beat him, which would have been very impressive. He didn't just land some nice shots in a funky sort of style, which he did, and then mixed up the wrestling and sort of scratched out a 2-1 decision. He took him to the floor, an area where he's very well versed and documented to be very well versed in a nation of origin that is also documented to be very well versed in wrestling.
Tongue twister.
And he just, big brothered him. There's nothing else to say. There's never been a clearer case for a 10-8 round, in my opinion. He struck with him and he didn't concede a shot. He took him down. He dominated him for the full. He was a step ahead on every position. A step ahead on absolutely every position. And the thing that's so impressive with Grant Dawson is he's got that stickiness to him. He's got that top pressure to him that's just so hard to work on the next position and dig underhooks and build frames, because you don't really get any space to operate. And the thing I find super fascinating is if you listen to Grant Dawson in these interviews, he's a massive, massive proponent for the Dagestani style of wrestling. And you can see how he transitions into the Dagestani handcuffs, how he collects the wrists, how he ties up the legs, that top pressure, using the legs as sort of another weapon to just pin your opponent down. And he's emulated that game so well. And you said about MMA maths. I mean, we have to MMA maths here because the call out was fantastic, by the way. He called out Fitzev, Gamrot, and Arman Sarukian.
Yeah.
And absolutely any one of those I really want to see. And I think if you've put together a 9-fight win streak in the UFC, in the lightweight division, like a Beneil Dariush, you have every right to go and call your shots like that after a performance
Yeah,
like
I
that.
completely agree. Yeah, he deserves more plaudits. I think the only reason he probably doesn't is because he's not as predatory. He doesn't. I think that is a problem. That's maybe something to improve on.
Look on
Is
his record,
he had those
full of
positions?
finishes, full of finishes. But that just goes
I'll
to
hold that
show
then. Yeah,
Ismagulov's
yeah, that's true.
defense.
Actually,
To
very
be
true.
perfectly honest,
Yeah,
it was a weird fight because you sort of saw two things. You saw two stories playing out. How Grant Dawson's grappling was so impressive that he could get to these positions and control and do all of this manipulations into just beating him into every second position.
yeah,
But then you also saw Damir Ismagulov not being able to get up, so he couldn't get to that level. But the fact that he could defend all those submissions from Grant Dawson was impressive because he had
yes, very true.
that body triangle on
Body
for almost
triangle
3 rounds, and just
that would
having
have
that,
sapped him
yeah,
from the first round. I mean, he got it in the first round, right? I'm not.
yeah, no, he
Yeah.
did.
He got it all 3 rounds. Yeah. But that is so tiring and sapping to your energy. You're just crushing your abdomen. It's brutal. So as well, having in that position for so long, and minutes, you start to lose, the energy, the stamina
Mm.
goes. There's no room to breathe, and you can't, and you start to slow, and the submission just gets. You're more likely to just get, to get choked because you can't. Eventually you can't fight it. So it is impressive. I guess that is a testament to how well he defended, as much as he did get dominated in the grappling department.
I think if you
But
have a
yeah,
look at his record as well, you have a look how many rear naked chokes he's got. He's
yeah. Maybe
so
I think
good
I might
in
be
that
wrong then. Yeah,
position. He's so good in that position because he gets that back so well, and he
the
transitions to the
control
back
was
so well.
very, very, very good.
And you have to think that's quite literally 15 minutes of one mistake, and you're being choked unconscious. So it's actually a very, weirdly enough, impressive defensive performance from Damir Ismagulov to have someone like Grant Dawson on his back. It's similar to the Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling fight. It's
Yes,
all I could think of when I thought
that's same.
about watching this fight is because you've got two practitioners there that are so highly versed in transitioning to the back and the body triangle and getting choked from that position. And to survive it is almost as impressive as the
Yeah,
domination
completely,
itself, right? So
completely.
you're on this sort of neutral ground of very good offensive but defensive jiu-jitsu. The
Just
only
getting out of the triangle getting out of the triangle is quite literally half of that battle because it's so. Once you've got that locked in, it's pretty much impossible to get out. Imagulov was doing the right things. So he was shaking from one side because you want the person with the body triangle, you want their foot that's going across
on the
the body,
floor, right?
pointing. Yeah, no, you want their foot on the floor. Yeah, exactly. So instead of pointing up, so he's rocking from one side to the other to force Dawson to switch over, and then that switch over between the legs, that is that brief second where you get that gap in between where you can look for an escape. So he was doing all the right things, but it's so difficult.
You say that, and he, don't get me wrong, he done some good stuff in that position. But they mentioned it on commentary, and I remember thinking it at the time. There was still more he could have done to address that body lock because he still wasn't using his legs that much to unhook the actual
Yeah,
lock, if that makes sense. He wasn't, because that's what, like you said, there's multiple ways of actually defending that body lock as well, like And one of the ways I was listening to Craig Jones talk about it the other day
mm.
about how to address that body lock, and it is so important to address that actual lock and use your own legs to sort of try and unpick it, but you're also having to defend the choking arm as well at the same time. So
Yes,
of
that's what.
course
Yeah,
it's super
God,
difficult, right? So
wow, almost forgot about that. Like, yeah,
yeah.
you're literally gonna get choked
So
out.
you're more than forgiven. And I did even see a couple of times Demir address the lock with his hands very quickly, but it's just too dangerous not to go 2-on-1 up
Very
top.
risky.
So
Yeah.
anyway, we've got so many fights to talk about. We need to whiz through it. We need to whiz through a couple. So just chuck out a couple of big performances and give me a couple
Yeah.
of statements on them.
I gotta say, disappointed with well, I'm more impressed
Bomb
with
Finn.
how well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta say, Sandini, he got clipped a few times there. I was convinced someone was gonna get knocked out in that first round because it was just they are both throwing absolute haymakers. But Sandini really he just would not let go. He got into the
Nope.
cage, just wasn't letting go, dragged him down. And you have to give him credit against both those guys, both the Bonfim guys. They train, very experienced grapplers. His brother more so. But still, they're both very competent on the ground, and that's no disrespect to Saint Denis either. But it's a testament to how good of a win that is to choke him out in the first round, no less, against a really highly touted guy. Yeah, very very impressed because I think when he fought in France, he lost. Yeah, when he had that, did he lose in France? Or when did he absolutely get beaten down?
That was the fight that I
That was in
said was the
France. Was
most
that in
uncomfortable.
France?
That weren't in France. That was the fight that
No.
I said was the most uncomfortable one I've
Yes.
ever watched. But to preface that, that was up a weight class at welterweight,
Yes.
and
True.
that was on about 4 days' notice. It was ridiculous. So he was
He looks
complete.
huge for lightweight, doesn't he?
He's a
He
big
really
boy,
does.
and I don't know if you remember last week when I said about Saint Denis. I said about number one, his durability. I was thinking in my head
Yes, you're
when
bang
people
on.
were calling Bonfim finishes, I said, these people have not watched tape. They have not watched the tape on Saint Denis because they would not be picking that because that is not a sensible move. And you may call me crazy for saying that because
No,
Bonfim was
absolutely
on a
not. Well, you were right, weren't
9-year
you?
unbeaten streak. 9 years. That's
Shit.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. And he went in there with that notion that he could beat anyone, and absolutely he should, because for 10 years he pretty much has, and he's been knocking everyone out. But Saint Denis is not that guy. He is not that
Those
guy.
body kicks. It's like
It
his controller was stuck pressing the same button over and over.
and
Just
it
kept
was and
throwing
it
him.
was really, really good game planning as well, because he said that with his Muay Thai coach, he knew that he was gonna want to throw big right hands and try and get the knockout. Of course he was, because he's done that to everyone. So he thought, okay, I'll just break his arms. And I loved that. I love that methodical destruction of opponents, whether it's on the calf kick, whether it's on the body kicks, whether it's sapping the power out the arms with those body kicks or those high kicks. He done that. He took him down, and once he gets you there, again, very similar to Grant Dawson, just so
Yeah.
sticky and so strong and so good at beating you to the next position. And again, I'm sitting here with the smuggest look on my face because I'm on
Yeah,
my
I'll give it to
verdict.
you. I'll
I'm
give it
on
to you.
my
You're
verdict, and I've got
absolutely
a third round
trouncing me.
submission. And I looked at what the global scorecards had, and everyone had Bonfim, and I didn't realize Saint Denis was an underdog actually for this fight. Well, I
Yeah, slight, yeah.
guess it makes sense, right?
You
But
should wait until my predictions for the next week. I'm telling you, this one's gonna get exciting.
okay, I'm looking forward to
I
it.
got some
Right,
crazy shouts. We'll
we
get
got
there, but
that's the thing. We've got so many to
yeah,
talk
no,
about.
we'll get
Right,
there. We'll get there.
let's rattle them off. Next one. A little bit
Oh
quicker.
no, Kevin Lee, man. So funny about this. I got my brother just came back from his year abroad. So he came back yesterday.
Gap year.
Yes, a gap year. And I was with my dad as well, and he's not into the sport. Neither of them watch the sport. My dad's very much more of a boxing. Yes, we love boxing, but MMA is a violent blood sport. Blah blah blah. Archaic views.
What?
Yeah. I know it doesn't make any
13
sense.
deaths a year in boxing.
Exactly.
300 headshots on
Exactly.
average in a fight. I like watching boxing, but it's an incredibly dangerous
Exactly.
sport with a
Yeah.
lot of head trauma.
So we ended up having a little debate about that. But the first thing we turned on, obviously, because he was on at the time, I was like, "Oh, do you want to watch it with me?" He's like, "Yeah, okay." So I was quite excited. Turned it on. Kevin Lee's just kicking up the vote. Literally. Yeah, I was like, "Oh, I'm like," he was like, "Right, who's gonna win this one?" I was like, "Well, I want this guy to win. I want Kevin Lee to win, but he's not gonna." And then 30 seconds later, he just gets caught with that straight right down the pipe, and that brutal guillotine. Oh yeah, proper power guillotine, just cranking it. Yeah, it was. You have to give. You have to. It was coming, wasn't it? Really. He looked like someone. I saw someone describe him. It looked like he was moving through like chocolate pudding when he was on the feet. I was like, that's such a good way of describing it. He just looked so slow and past it, which does hurt a little bit. Because I do like Kevin.
It was just the weirdest matchup from the start. They brought him back into the UFC. He's a big name. A lot of people know who he is. There was quite a little bit of, well, quite a little bit isn't a great sentence. There was a little bit of hype with him coming back because obviously he's confident as always and as he should be, and happy days, very entertaining. They bring him back, they put him on a fight night on the prelims against, if anyone knows, an absolute monster who's only lost twice and he's won 20 straight fights.
He's lost once.
Once, sorry. And he's won 20 straight fights.
You have to feel for it, man.
And it was just the weirdest of matchmaking anyway, and I sort of knew how this was going to play out. Kevin Lee just absolutely stuck in the mud, no head movement at all, left his head on centre line, got drawn into just throwing a little bit of a lazy jab out, and then got countered with that beautiful right hand. As you said, the power guillotine was devastating. And then if you're watching with someone that isn't the biggest fan of MMA, seeing Kevin Lee unconscious for minutes, face down on the canvas, asleep, and then asking what's happening is not the greatest thing to happen.
Yeah, he was like, oh, it's brutal. Like, yeah, well, I was like, he's fine, don't worry. Yeah. And then cut to that shot of him looking off into space. I'm like, yeah, no. It's just because he got punched. He would have been fine from the choke. He's not going to die.
The truth of it as well is 170 pounds is actually heating up to be one of the most exciting divisions at the moment.
Very much so.
Which is very random. And I don't think a lot of people saw this coming, because you had Usman at the top for a while. It was very stale. You had Colby, and there's still a little bit of that mess going on with Leon and Colby and that whole situation. But the truth of it is, when you look at the top and you've got Hamzat Chimaev potentially fighting, you've got Rachmanov, you've got Kelvin Gastelum entering the mix, you've got Kevin Holland who's jumped into welterweight and making it exciting. And then you start adding on prospects like Jack Della Maddalena, then you start adding in Rinat, then you start adding in people like Ian Gary. Things get super exciting at welterweight, right?
Yeah, very, very exciting. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that in the future, but talk about Gastelum. He's fighting. You said Gastelum and Rachmanov. They're fighting, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
That's a very interesting matchup. I almost feel for Gastelum a little bit.
I don't know at all. I think it's a great matchup.
You think so?
Yeah, I really do.
I mean, it'll be an exciting fight, but I feel like it's only going one way. But I don't want to. I don't want to get into that.
I think, just because you said it, I was going to say let's move on, but just because I've got a hot take on it, and I've seen a lot of people hate it, so I thought I'd just put it out now.
I just feel for Kelv.
No, in terms of my take on it, I just think it's a really good fight for Kelv. I really, really do. I think if you look at Rachmanov, as good as I think he is, the thing that he hasn't got at the moment is experience, a lot of experience in 5-rounders, or even 3-rounders against some of the very best, even though he had a very, very impressive win. And the one thing that he does when he fights, and so he should, because he should have sky-high confidence because he's got all finishes and all wins, which is super impressive. But he leaves his head on the centre line aggressively and eats shots that he does not need to eat. And that's not a good thing to do against Kelvin Gastelum, because he has an absolute piston for a left hand, which usually always finds the mark. And if you're leaving your head on centre line against someone like Kelv, who's going to be able to probably take all your best shots anyway, who's got one of the best chins in the organisation, I think that's a tricky fight for Rachmanov. I don't think you're going to be able to... You're not going to be able to choke Kelvin Gastelum. He's got no neck and no limbs. You're not going to be able to... You're not going to really be able to wrestle him. He's a fantastic wrestler and comes from that background. And if you want to box with him and leave your head on the centre line against someone that hits that hard, I think that's a good matchup for Kelv.
Maybe, yeah. You know what? You're selling it to me. I was going to say the head movement is probably the biggest hole in his game. If with Kevin Lee,
we're getting sidetracked. Come on,
I know.
Pull out a couple of big ones. Let's not go too far into the rest of the card. Just pull out a couple of big star performances, because there was a few nice finishes.
Michael Morales, actually.
Wow, impressive.
I do want to actually give credit to Max Griffin though, because he really hung in there and he was game, and he actually impressed me as well. Obviously, he did lose the fight at the end of the day, and that's what's going to be on the record books. But I thought he hung in there really well. Credit to Michael Morales, his momentum, he just kept turning it up, and by the third round, it's almost like he was just firing off even more. It's what it felt like. By the third round, you'd think he was tired, he'd be tiring, but no, he just kept going. Pressing him, feinting in, and getting him against the cage, and then just loading those straight shots down the middle. It was. I mean, all sorts of shots. Really, he just kept going. It was very impressive.
This is another 170 pounder, by the way. Let's just chuck into the mix. Moves to 15-0. And the thing that was so impressive about Michael Morales, and I watched him on Dana White's Contender Series, is he fights so beyond his years and uses his skills so intelligently. It's so refreshing to watch, and it really is this crazy new era of mixed martial arts. And it's done at a very high level because he has an exceptional jab that he utilizes beautifully throughout the fight. And he does a very rare thing, what a lot of young mixed martial artists don't do. When you have an unbeaten record, you have a lot of wins by stoppage. You have a lot of finishes. It's easy to understand your power and your athleticism and just to rely on it too heavy and get overexcited. But he doesn't do that. He expends his energy very well. He steps back. He takes a deep breath. He re-enters the range.
Yep.
He gets his jab off. He slows the tempo down to his fight. And then as the fight gets later, he decides to just pick it up a little bit more and find those bigger openings. And then he's just landing with the same power as he did in the first because he hasn't really expended much energy until then. And the thing that impressed me so much about him was his takedown defense. His hits are so freakishly strong. It's like trying to move cement pillars. And he's so skilled.
Good way of putting it.
The switch that he hit in the second or third round, and then the body lock takedown he got at the end. And he's got 2 Olympians as parents. His mum just won the Pan American Games. He's a freak, and I mean freak.
And he's
athlete.
only like 26, isn't he?
25 years of age.
25. That's even more impressive.
170 pounds need to watch out.
If I'm going to play matchmaker, I'll throw him and Ian Gary in a cage. I've got to say, that would
Why
be
would you do that? Why would you do that with the prospects? Come on.
Nah, I'm talking about... Get the semantics out of it. I'm talking about what's a good fight. That's a good fight. That's my...
Ian Gary versus anyone's a pretty good fight, to be honest, at the moment.
Yeah. Well, nah, come on then. Put those two together.
I love watching Ian Gary at the moment.
Yeah, and he's also just infectious.
Yeah.
He's a very infectious personality. I don't know when he's next fighting. But
and I don't know how
soon.
well perceived this is going to be, but I think Ian Gary's not a good matchup for Rakhmonov either, by the way.
No, I completely agree.
At all.
Yeah.
I think he's actually a terrible matchup. A terrible matchup. Because you look at Ian Gary's grappling, which is ever improving, and defensively and offensively, and then you have a look at what he can do on the feet. I don't think there's going to be a lot of 170 pounders who are going to want to fight. And on the topic of 170 pounds, when we're looking at a couple of years down the line and we're looking at people like JDM versus Ian Gary, I mean, the prospects at 170 pounds are just...
It's racking up, man.
I'm frothing.
Again. Yeah. Tangents, though.
It's exciting. Yeah, move.
Yeah, but you're right, though. You're completely right. Let's get
What's
on to
another big one from this? No, let's move on to 290. Yeah, okay. I forget this card. It was unbelievable.
The meat, man.
That's what I need to say. UFC Vegas 276, sorry.
Very good fight night.
Was a fantastic fight night, and it was stacked. A lot of said coming into it, this is a fun fight night, and it did deliver.
It was good.
There's a few decisions, but other than that, we saw some good fight. Let's not mess about. UFC 290.
Now we're on to the meat, man. We're talking the good stuff. I've been looking forward to this card. This is probably one of my favorite cards ever. Just off of like appearances anyway. We're not talking about fights, but there's so many bangers, man. I can't. The one I just want to jump into is actually we'll start from the top. Why not? We'll go from the top. I know I said I was going to talk about my predictions because then I'd be a little bit rogue. I have to. Every time I look at this matchup, the only, the brain is telling me that Volk's going to win. But every time I see the matchup, my first instinct is that Yair is going to win. It really is, and he's such a big underdog. And I don't know why. I don't know why he's such a big underdog. I think if there's one guy who's going to have the style to beat Volk, it's him. It's so tricky to deal with. There's no easy blueprint to beat a guy like him. There just isn't, because he's good everywhere. It doesn't matter where you take him. He is dangerous everywhere in the most unorthodox ways. So that's such a unique challenge that I actually think Alex is going to struggle. I don't think it's going to be anything to do with the psychology of him losing against Islam. I don't think there's anything like that, because we know how good Volk is. He knows how good he is and what he's done in the featherweight division specifically. Yair I feel like it's his time. I can see a submission win inside the 5 easily. That's just the way I see it. So I'm picking Yair there. I have to say, it's all I've been thinking about. I've never really decided about it on which one I'm going to pick, but I'm going to put my foot down and just say Yair's going to win because it's all I can imagine. So yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because I've had a similar thought myself, and anyone that knows me or follows me knows that Volk is 100% one of my favourite fighters in terms of just mindsets and also ability in the cage and just everything together that he embodies being a champion, well and truly. His mental fortitude is as impressive as absolutely anyone in sport, let alone the UFC. So I always love watching him compete, and I have a big soft spot in my heart for freestyle MMA as well, going down there and spending some time there with a few of the boys and obviously Joe Lopez and getting to chat to him. But when I look at this fight, it's so interesting because on one hand, we have Yair Rodriguez, and I look at what he does, and I watched the Dan Hardy breakdown, which was excellent, and all the skills he does with as much randomness as it looks like, he also has a lot of intention and deliberate nature to what he's doing and how he sets things up. And the thing I feel like is going to be the only area I can see Volk struggling is sometimes in his defensive duties. He tends to lean out of range at times. He gets quite comfortable in the pocket. He has quite a nice guard often, and he sometimes gets quite comfortable. And we saw it against Max Holloway a few times. And I just think if he does that against Yair, he could run himself onto a dangerous high kick or spinning back kick or something wild of that variety. So I would look out for that first and foremost. But when I look at Yair Rodriguez and I look at the complexity of his striking and the diversity of it, laterally, moving backwards, both stances, he can do things that realistically no one else in the world of fighting can do. There's no one else that can do what he does really in mixed martial arts. There really isn't. But then when I think about that and I think of all the threats that he poses, like you said, on the feet at range, in close quarters, he can strike at every range. That's what's so impressive. He's got his long range weapons, his mid range weapons, and then we've seen what he can do in close range against people like the Korean Zombie, obviously to name a few. The thing that's so impressive is when you look at the other side of it, you say, well, yeah, Volk has probably never fought a Yair Rodriguez because no one really has. But until people have fought Volk, they've never really fought a Volk
That's
either.
true as well.
And as good as you think Yair is, and when I think about it, as skilled and as difficult a puzzle as he can make it, I then think, but on the flip side, we have Volk, who equally has both stances, defensively, offensively, very sound. His distance management, his footwork, it's to a level that not many people have ever seen. And although we've seen Yair against Max Holloway, we know that Volk just has a slightly more layered game than Max when it comes to striking and that IQ that he uses with his footwork and cutting off his opponents and changing range. So I think on the feet, this is super interesting.
I think the one you're talking about, the high kick being the way thing. I think it's actually the body kick. Personally, I think he threw that a lot against Emmett. He's such a weird way of throwing it. It's a very weird. It's a very weird tell. And obviously I'm not gonna. I think we know that Volkanovski and his team and they're going to be analyzing that. They're going to be ready for that. Of course they are. But when you're in there, they're going to know with a guy like to just expect the complete opposite or something else, because it's just, you don't know fighting a guy like that. I feel like with Volkanovski, you know what you're gonna get, and that's what makes him so impressive, is because you can't stop it anyway. He's that brilliant. He's none of his stuff is flashy. It's functional, but he does it to an absolutely elite standard across every precipice. So that's what he's so difficult to deal with. So for me, but the body kicks, I think are the real. If that's how I see it going, I think the body kicks early in the first few rounds, really just throwing those, and to the leg as well, a few calf kicks in there, masking those underneath. I could see that being a real weapon for sure.
It's a good,
but again, it's a close fight.
It's a good point. It's a good point that you brought up about the team, because when I went down to freestyle and I spoke to Joe, I said about the camp for Yair Rodriguez, I said, are you bringing anyone in to emulate his style because he's so tricky? And the person that he said they were working with is Cole Van Room. For anyone that knows, works with Adesanya on his striking, who is, don't quote me on this, but something like an 8-time world champion in his discipline. And his kicks and the diversity and creativity in his kicks are second to none in the world of combat sport. And that's not to say that he's going to be able to perfectly emulate Yair Rodriguez, because he's his completely own style. But in terms of getting prepared, you know that freestyle MMA, you know that city kickboxing, you know that Frank Hitman, you know that Craig Jones, you know that Carl Van Room are going to be in that training room brainstorming some of the finest game planning that there is in mixed martial arts. And you're looking at some of the smartest minds. And I think when they look to break this fight down, they're going to look to corral Yair Rodriguez, get him to fight backwards, try and suffocate him, use Volk's footwork that he does so well about making you think that you're just out of range, but slowly he's drawing you into range, and then he's landing right hands and he's training together, he's wrestling. I think that he's going to try and make this a close quarters fight. I think we're going to look for him to try and get tight body locks and maybe try and take Yair down and land ground and pound. It's going to be very hard for Yair to work submissions off his back and his attack, even though he's so good at it. Volk doesn't allow those things to happen because he's not playing in guard. He's not playing in guard. He's creating frames. He's getting that heavy scrum-like structure. It's like he's clearing out a ruck in rugby union, and he's just raining down heavy shots. And I think if he's going to win this fight, he's going to need to suffocate that style of Yair Rodriguez, know that he's going to get a little bit wet as he walks out into the rain, take him down, take him to deep waters, and he's just going to have to put a pace on him, because we've seen the blueprint almost there a little bit from Max Holloway, but it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it.
I kind of want you to stop talking because you're selling it to me and you're making me just doubt everything, and it's pissing me off. No, I mean, the thing is, they're all valid points, and they're all things I also agree with. Like, it's a winnable fight for both guys, but I think the odds should not be as wide as they are. I think the eye has a much bigger chance.
Agreed.
I think on Bet365 he's like a 3.5-1.
No,
3.5-1, which is absolutely wild.
Shouldn't be.
So I'm thinking of a little accumulator on there just for punting purposes.
And we've seen Yair get better, right? Fight on fight.
Yes, exactly. I did want to say, actually, he's in, at these sort of lighter divisions, speed is so important. So guys tend to tail off at their they tend to tail off on their primes a lot earlier than the heavier divisions. You can hang in there at heavyweight because you can just got that knockout power at like 40 years old. You can still absolutely put people away. You can't do that at featherweight and the light end going down. Obviously it becomes more prevalent the lower you get, but at featherweight it's still a thing. I think you lose that speed, that edge, that reaction time, that goes, they can really make a big difference. And Volkan, obviously he's 34, so he's starting to now tail out of his prime, really. I think, and we don't need to, we just need to look at history to see that it's what happens in this sport is that guys, no one's reign lasts forever. They tail off and they tend to drop off pretty drastically. It's what I said about Usman, and it's what I think is going to happen. I think Usman will lose his next fights, or maybe one or two. And that's not a discredit to how good he has been, because it's just the same way every fighter goes. You reach the top of your ability, and then you start to decline. It's just a natural order of things, and I could happen with Volk. We might see inklings of that against Yair. So that is something to think about as going forward. Even if he does beat Yair going forward into his next fight, how that age is, and they start to tail off, how that's going to affect him, for sure. Yeah.
The last thing I'll say on this is, when I looked back at the footage of Volkanovski and watching him fight, the thing I always think is so impressive when it's in his preparation, when it's in his actual contest, is his balance in his striking. Not just his footwork, but his balance in all of his striking and both stances. Because the thing that he doesn't do, what a lot of people do in MMA, is go crashing into range. He works his way into range, but he doesn't crash into range. And you see when Yair Rodriguez is so dangerous against people in those close quarters, in those sort of clinch positions, is because people come crashing in. If you have a look at the zombie fight, the reason he gets that finish is because he comes crashing into that range with his hands down, almost trying to throw bombs and find Yair, because people get frustrated sometimes because they can't hit him. Or when they do, they think, okay, I've got to capitalize, and then they go crashing into range. But Volkanovski brings his feet with him. He brings his stance with him. He works his way into there, and then he goes to work. And that's just the small difference I think there's going to be in this fight. And I think that's just where he's going to edge it, is he's going to be able to dictate that range just a tad better. That's how I see him getting it done. But by all means, I think there's going to be a super competitive fight. I just think he's going to be able to do enough in 5 rounds, to just do enough in terms of being too savvy. I think the skill level is going to be so close, but I think it's going to come down to the finer nuances in a true championship bout, where Volk is just going to edge it on a little bit more savviness and just a little bit more layered execution of being there and doing it at the highest level on multiple occasions.
You're going to go final
I'm
predictions.
going to go Volk. Unanimous decision. A close unanimous decision.
Yeah. Oh no, no, I'm not changing. I'm not. I'm sticking to my guns.
Stick by it.
It's definitely gonna absolutely bite me in the arse. Yeah, no, I'm gonna yeah, let's run with it.
There is every chance that
it?
Yair Rodriguez does something obscene because
I
we've
could
seen
actually
it
see a
so many
TKO.
times.
Yeah.
It's documented. We've seen it against the elite featherweights so many times. Ridiculous kicks. We've seen ridiculous elbows, stupid finishes. That fight against Josh Emmett, I'm not being funny. When I saw that fight, that did go how I expected. So although it was super impressive, I wasn't sitting there thinking Volk's going to be super alarmed at that fight, because then you heard him speak about it and he also thought that was where that was going to go, because he was just streets ahead of Josh Emmett on the feet. Okay, we've got our, so you're going to say a TKO in what round?
I'm gonna go. I think if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen early, because I think, as you said, Volkan obviously has got the little nuances to his game, that championship medal, to I think have that advantage in the latter round. So I'm gonna go with round two, TKO. I see maybe a high kick, a set up from the body kicks, maybe perhaps, which would stun him, same way Holloway did in their second fight. Yair has that experience. He has that predatory experience to get the finish. So I could see it. Yeah. I'm gonna go with that TKO in the second round. Might bite me in the arse, but we'll run with it.
Well, talking about 2 rounds, the next 2 have had 2 rounds before, and that is Pantoja versus Brandon Moreno. We're actually looking at a trilogy fight in the co-main event, which is extremely rare because the champion is in fact 0-2 against the challenger, Pantoja. And you said earlier, this is one of your favourite fight cards ever. And when you actually have a look at the matchups and you have a look at the talent on the card, I understand why you say that. Because you're talking about the likes of Alexandre Pantoja. My goodness.
He's my guy.
You're talking about one of the most exciting fighters in the world, bar none. This man can knock you out on the feet. He is going to come to fight, and he can choke you out in any which way, and he's going to come from the first bell to the last. What do you think about this one? Because this is fireworks.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier about psychology not necessarily being a factor. I can't remember who I was talking about the fight there, but
Volk, Islam.
Yes. But for this one, I think it is a big deal. I think there's a difference between losing once, but losing twice to the same guy, it's that can be. I feel like that is a real factor, and I don't think enough people are talking about that. And that's
interesting.
And that's on top of how good Pantoja is on the ground. He's got some of the best submission games ever. Like that choke against Alex Perez, and man, it's like it was just
that was disrespectful.
The day in the office,
that was disrespectful.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what would happen if I just walked out there, laced up some gloves, and said we're fighting. He would have done that to me. He would have ran forward, thrown a massive right hand at my face, jumped on my back, and chucked me unconscious.
There is something about just standing or mounted, just rear naked chokes, which I just
little spider monkey move.
Yeah, exactly. There's something about it which I just love, and he is. I think not enough people are giving enough credit, really. And I love Moreno. I really do. I think it's this thing. It's one of those fights. So I just want a good scrap. I just want both of them to go home happy, but that's not going to happen because someone's got to lose, really. Or you can get a draw, but someone's keeping the belt, or someone's gaining it. It's one of those. So it's a fight I almost don't like because I like both of them so much. It's impossible not to like Moreno. He's just got that infectious personality. And one thing I will say, I'm picking Pantoja to win, but I think we've looked at the improvements Moreno has made before.
True.
Early in his tenure. I mean, people forget he got cut from the UFC.
Yep.
Maybe a bit harsh, but it did happen, and he came back, and showed how good he really is, and how much he improved. If you just look at his progression as a fighter, how much more well-rounded he's become.
True.
He deserves to be the champion, and I think he's earned that. But I will say there's we're saying the holes again. Kevin Lee reference one more time. He against Kai Kara-France, he was actually, a lot of people don't really talk about the fact he was in a lot of danger there. Granted, he got that finish, but he was getting caught quite a lot.
True.
So there are gaps on the feet for a guy, especially a guy like Pantoja, who's equally talented.
True.
Maybe not exactly to the same level in those fine margins, but he's a very, very competent striker. And I think he definitely has the edge on the ground, but in the grappling and the submission game. But I will say Moreno in his scrambles he's
Different level.
very good in his scrambles. I don't know if you've seen this, about a 5 second highlight. One of my favorite, just for me, it
Him
just
and
encompasses MMA. There's a little clip
Figueiredo.
between him and Figueiredo. Yeah, I can't remember if it's the third or the fourth fight. I think it's the fourth.
Mm.
Where there's like Moreno's on his back and he gets this little he does this little foot sweep
Another
and
one.
just completely trips up Figueiredo, who stands up, and then Figueiredo jumps for a guillotine, and it's just like this 5 second perfect sequence, which I love. And I think it shows you how good Moreno is. Just think on his feet and just pull that out of his locker. He's got that. He's crafty.
I think we need to, firstly, before I get into the X and O's of this fight, I think we firstly need to really have a serious conversation about normalizing and making flyweight main events way more frequent throughout the fight nights. Because if there's any event you want to watch 5 rounds of, it's of the flyweights. Because if you don't answer with something along those lines, you're not paying enough attention to the lighter weight classes, the 125s, the 135s. These guys at these weight classes just can push a pace and have such well-rounded games and have such well-layered games that it's so competitive, and the ferocity and the intensity that they can work at for 25 minutes is insane. And we're going to see that again with these two, because they come out from the first minute to the last and they fight for absolutely every position. And you talked about mentality before, and there's no better mentality in the game of mixed martial arts than Brandon Moreno. Not only did he get picked last on the Ultimate Fighter, not only did he get released from the UFC, not only did he come back, have that speech about not being a champion today or not
I love that.
What a lot of people forget is he went on to lose 2 fights after that. A lot of people don't remember that. He actually lost 2 fights after that. He came back and then he had a surge to the title and he fought Davison Figueiredo 4 times, which is arguably, or not arguably, is the scariest flyweight we've ever seen. So to do that not only elevated him to a new level of where he needed to just be, completely transcend his game, but I think the refreshment in his head of, right, I've finally got rid of this, I've finally got that new opponent, let me get those wins back. I'm at a point now where you become a champion, and Teddy Atlas always speaks about it, you become 30% better. And Brandon Moreno has come 30% better. He comes out now with this confidence and this swagger that you just wouldn't believe that someone used to get like him got released from the UFC. I think as good as Pantoja is, as hard as he hits, as unorthodox as his striking can be, as nicely as he chains it together with his grappling, and as just ludicrous his fighting style is, I just feel like over 5 rounds, Brandon Moreno's going to be a little bit sharper to the punch. He's going to be a little bit more educated. He's going to be a little bit more refined. And not necessarily like that's always going to be more effective. I just think over 5 rounds, he's just going to chip away a little bit more and be a little bit more intelligent in those positions. And I think he's going to be able to edge it. As you said earlier, Pantoja can really end the fight anywhere. And going in there knowing you've beaten this man twice, you've got this confidence, you've got this in the back of your mind thinking, I'm going to do it again. So he's got all this momentum behind him, he's got all these skills, and he's got all the belief he can beat this man because he's done it twice. So there's no reason that you shouldn't think that he can go out and do there again.
He could be overconfident,
so
though. This is also
this is the balancing act, right?
isn't it?
This is is like the teeter and edge that you need to find, which is so fascinating with combat sports. But let me push you for a prediction on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a round 4 submission, rear naked choke on the ground. I think I can see maybe him countering one of those body kicks as fast as he throws them. I think maybe Pantoja could potentially get the read on one of those. Get a takedown off of that, and then take the back. I could see it. As crafty as Moreno is in those scrambles, as I said. Once you're in a body triangle, if Pantoja can get that, you're not getting out, especially from a guy like him. So I could see it. I could see a rear naked choke. Maybe I'm gonna go 4th round.
I will be interested, like you said earlier, to see how he's adapted his game, Brandon Moreno, because he always does make adjustments. And obviously he was in that very weird predicament where only recently he had to change his trainer because of course he was
James
He was
Krause.
with
Oh my
James Krause
god.
before, so he had that whole change. So his career has been nothing but tumultuous, to say the least.
He fought the fourth Figueiredo fight without Krause, right?
Yeah, without Krause.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm interested to see the adjustments he makes in his style, because we always see new things added to his game, whether it's his stance, whether it's his striking, whether it's just a new tool like the spinning back half kick we saw a couple of times against Brandon Moreno, which was freakish that it landed twice with such accuracy and actually looked pretty painful, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But I just want to see how his stance looks, because a couple of things we've seen with Moreno before, he has that super wide boxing stance, which obviously opens him up for some nice striking, but also then leaves that leg there for hard low kicks, but it also leaves that front leg there for Pantoja to get hold of. And it's going to be a lot easier for him to latch onto that single leg and start chaining together his submissions and his wrestling and his grappling if he can just latch on to Brandon Moreno in any way.
Yeah.
So I think if we're going to see an adjustment, I think it's going to be a slight shift into not dipping all his weight over his front leg as much that he sometimes does. He has his head right over his front knee.
Head right forward.
And he has a really wide stance. And I think that would be advantageous for Pantoja. So it'd be interesting if we see a little bit of maybe a little bit more of a Muay Thai style, maybe. A little bit more upright. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn and I'm no high level championship level coach, but just a few things I've seen and heard other people speak of. I'd just be interested to see, because I just think if that leg's super wide on that wrestling base, that's gonna that boxing stance, that's gonna set up his lovely sharp hands. But I just think the easier it's gonna be to get his hands on Moreno for Pantoja, it's just gonna cause him damage. It's just gonna cause him brain issues that he doesn't need, because you don't want to be there with Pantoja. You want this fight standing if you're Brandon Moreno, although he does have incredible grappling skills. So you're going to go a third round submission.
Fourth round
submission.
Yeah, fourth round rear naked choke.
I'm going to say Brandon Moreno is just going to be too calculated. He's going to be too clever on the feet. I think he's going to be too sharp. I think he's going to have good enough scrambles and good enough defense to sort of fight off a couple of dangerous attacks. And on the feet, I feel like Pantoja's not going to have as much of a layered attack and as much nuance to his game as Brandon Moreno. So I'm going to go a decision on that one. But chuck a couple
I was
of
if he's going to win, it's going to be decision.
Yeah, chuck a couple of big fights at me on this card, because it's pretty stacked, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, I don't think we need to spend much time on Whittaker versus Duplessis, because I think
careful what you say. I'm telling you that.
No, I'm not being careful. I'm not being careful. There is no possible way Dricus Duplessis wins this fight. I'm sorry.
Wow.
And I don't care. And I was literally about to say, I'll laugh if he wins this fight, because the MMA community will absolutely
melt.
Erupt.
It will melt.
It will melt. But there is no way he wins this. I'm seeing a round. Say again. No way, man. Come on now. Let's be real.
When I first saw this fight got made, I've seen every fight from Dricus Duplessis in the UFC. When this fight got made, I thought this is the biggest mass mismatch I've seen since Nate Diaz and Khamzat Chimaev. That's my initial thought. And this is a top 5 surging talent looking to compete for the title. And then I thought, every single fight of Dricus Duplessis, you question him and you doubt him.
I know.
And he loves it. And you watch him fight, and you know that he's got this extensive kickboxing record, but his feet are 2 feet behind him, and he leans into range with his chin up, and he throws shots from his waist, and he gasses in 30 seconds, and his styles are just so unorthodox and
he's
so
living
unpretty.
in the middleweight division.
And you're looking at it and you're thinking, there's no way. And then the other person gets a little bit tired and they're a little bit slower, and he sort of gets his hands on them and he's sort of wearing them down a little bit, and he's sort of landing a few heavy shots from in close range, and he's got really strong grips, and anything, just short shots, little hammers and little fists in close quarters, and when they're in the clinch and someone's getting a little bit more tired, and all of a sudden they're both tired and now they're breathing heavy and he's working through the lactic acid and he's grinding through this.
I'm laughing
and you're looking at it and you're
thinking
thinking, how's this man doing this? Because he doesn't have the skill to do it. And then he starts getting into grappling exchanges and you can't take away from him that he's got really good back control. He's got really nice transitions. He's really sticky. He's really strong. And if nothing else, he's got an unrelenting will to win. And there's a lot to be said for that when you're coming into fights like Robert Whittaker. And we can say, of course, it takes no genius to say that stylistically we look on paper and Bobby Knuckles is one of the best strikers documented in history in the UFC, is one of the most credentialed middleweights of all time. Without Israel Adesanya, we could be looking at a 10-fight win streak and 5-6 defenses. The sky's the limit for Bobby Knuckles. He's really skilled in absolutely everywhere. But there's some fights that just make you think, oh, is something going to happen here? Is something ridiculous going to happen here? That's the question I'm asking.
Not. Come on now. You're entertaining it, but you don't believe it, surely.
Of course, I look at the situation where in the real world, these fight 10 times and Bobby Knuckles wins probably, I think, 8.5 times out of 10.
I think he wins 10 out of 10.
Potentially he wins 10 out of 10. Potentially he does win out of 10. But what if we see the 11th? What if? Yeah, I know. What if there is? What if there is that fragment of Bobby Knuckles' mind? As much as he doesn't say it's true, but he's thinking, right, it's perfectly cleared and lined up for me to fight Israel Adesanya. And although I say this guy's good in the media, he's got skills, and I'm respecting him, I'm gonna wipe the floor with this guy. I'm gonna piece him up. He's no Israel Adesanya. I've been in there with the Romeros. I've been in there with the Jared Cannoniers and the Marvin Vettori. I'm gonna piece this guy up, and I'm gonna go to the title. Yeah. And he just lets it slip once.
I don't think he will. I don't think he's going to cut corners. I don't think Whittaker's the kind of guy to do that. If he didn't, I mean, if he did, he wouldn't have beaten the entire bloody top 15. It feels like at this point, you know. Yep. So I think, the way I see it, I think it's a pretty. I can see a round 1 finish. I really can.
Really?
I can see,
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I got to remember this one's only a 3-rounder. It's not. We're not going 25. So I can see, you know, we know how good Whittaker...
We've seen Whittaker's tired and hurt and just falling over and sloppy, and your brain says he's getting...
I know, but you said earlier about everyone until they run into a guy like Volkanovski. It's the same with Whittaker, man.
Yeah, different level.
He just is a step above. And the way that classic, he has that 3-piece jab, jab cross high kick. Yeah, that's how I see it. I see a high kick. And obviously,
best combination in MMA.
Studying that. It's so clean. You know, when he landed that at will against guys like Kelvin Gastelum.
Oh, wow. What performance.
Yeah, exactly.
What a performance.
That's the way I see it. I see that combo landing like money. I really do. And I don't think Dricus might, maybe in a second round, could go for a second round. Dricus could start to tire. The reaction time's not going to be there. Doesn't get to that head kick in time and he gets caught. That's just how I see it.
I'm going to be fun here. I'm just going to be fun before people hate me. And let's play some MMA maps. Why not? Let's play some MMA maps. Robert Whittaker, very close fight with Darren Till. Very close fight with Darren Till.
Yeah,
Dricus Duplessis, very competitive fight with Darren Till until it wasn't, and until he found a position that was awkward and climbed onto the back and got a submission.
We're not using Darren Till as the litmus test here. We're just not.
That's what we're doing. Oh, no, but all jokes aside, we have to entertain this. And when I look at it, that my two recent memories are these are my two recent memories. On one hand, I have Robert Whittaker, whose last performance was against Marvin Vettori, who absolutely outclassed Marvin Vettori and just made Marvin Vettori reassess his whole career in terms of understanding that next level is still quite far out of reach. Not saying he can't get there, but saying he's going to have to do a lot of work to get there. And he's come out on record and even said that to Michael Bisping. So he acknowledged that, and Robert Whittaker showed that. And there is every chance that he's going to do that with Dricus Duplessis. There is every chance he's just going to absolutely puzzle him on the feet. Absolutely puzzle him. There is every chance of that. But you never know. You never know, and I'm going to go a second round TKO stoppage from Bobby Knuckles.
Yeah, I'm going to go exactly the same. You're right, second round.
But if something crazy happens, I'm not going to sit there and be that shocked.
Nah, come on now. I'm not. I'm going to be shocked
because Duplessis has not come out and amazed me and shocked me with his skill level, but he's come out and shocked me with his ability to win, to grind wins out, and to just pull them out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And
I will say he's got that nose surgery now. He's going to be a new man.
And we have to remember, he is a kickboxing champion. And I'm not talking to his skill, I'm just talking to his ability to win. And then I think he's KSW, don't quote me, but he's also an MMA champion in a former promotion. And now he's coming to the UFC, he's unbeaten. And I was walking home the other day and I thought, let's actually flip the conversation around. And let's have a look at just names, not performances, but just names that Dricus du Plessis has beaten in terms of Trevin Giles, Derek Brunson, Darren Till. Let's just change the narrative and see, when we're talking about Israel Adesanya and his rise to the middleweight crown, in terms of name value, if we have a look at the names that Israel Adesanya went through to get to the top, we're talking very similar caliber fighters to Dricus du Plessis
himself as well.
I'm not talking about how the fights looked and the skill level, anything like that. I'm just looking at cold, hard facts of wins and names on a resume. Because that's what you have to do with du Plessis. Because if you're going to take him on his merit of fighting, you're probably going to be wrong quite often. Because he's just that guy. He's just that guy. But when you have a look at the cold, hard facts of how many wins he's got and who he's done it against, if we just forget his style and forget his name, the conversation is very, very different. So we're going to change topics here, but I'm actually intrigued for this one. As much as
I know, I mean, it's great. I'm excited either way.
Could
be the biggest fraud check in history.
What else is big on?
We'll run through. We've been going for quite a while. We'll run through a few of them. I will say Jalen Turner. I can see much. I love Dan Hooker. I love both of those guys. I think Jalen's he's the new breed, isn't he? Really. So good. I do think that fight will be closer than everyone says it is. I don't think Dan Hooker will really impress. Yeah, it's a winnable fight for both guys for sure. But I think Jalen's gonna have that edge. I think he's longer, a little bit. Both rangy guys, but I think Jalen could catch him with a high kick maybe, or just a straight right that just stuns Dan. I could see it.
I think if Jalen Turner's clever, he's going to do what he done against his teammate and look to the grappling as the advantage. Because I think if you're going to stand there and have a long-range kickboxing fight with Dan Hooker, you're not going to win that, I don't think. I really don't think, as good as I think Jalen Turner is, great striker, obviously works with Jason Perillo, gets high-level sparring in, is a very tricky customer, 6'3", long limbs. Let's not forget that Dan Hooker fought a light heavyweight and heavyweight as a kickboxer.
Did he?
Let's not forget this.
Jesus.
This is what I'm saying. So if you're going to have a kickboxing fight with Dan Hooker, bearing in mind that he's in the gym every day with Israel Adesanya at 6'4" and one of the best kickboxers we've ever seen.
That's a
very competitive rounds, who came from a kickboxing background, who has fought up weight classes before, so he's used to being at discrepancies. I think if you play that game with Dan Hooker, you're just going to be reminded why he is up there. And a lot of people say he hasn't looked the same since Dustin Poirier, but I don't really agree with that. Yes, he's had some losses to his name. Of course.
I mean, they've aged
He's
very well.
had a lot of fights. Yeah. They've aged very well. And if you have a look at the finer nuances of them, he's taken them on 6 days' notice. He's taken them with no camp. He's taken them when quarantines hit his country. He can't go home for 6 months. Well. And he's in a hotel room in himself just deciding he's going to drop down to featherweight and take a fight in 4 weeks. You look at the nuances and there's a lot of reasons to make you believe that he just wasn't planning out his career very strategically. But now he's had a little sit back. He's had a rethink. He's had a re-strategize. He's had a little bit of time since his last win. People were reminded that he's actually very good. And now you're looking at the Jalen Turner matchup. He's had a good camp, good preparation. I think it's a nice matchup. So I think if he can prevent the grappling, which I think he can do, and I think he's skilled enough to keep it standing, I think we could see Dan Hooker use those front kicks like we saw against Claudio Puelles. I think we can see those nice uppercuts and hooks in close range and just sort of get Jalen Turner on skates a little bit. I think he's going to knock him out in the third round. I think he's going to knock him out in the third round.
Wow. You know what? I could see that as well.
Look what I'm doing
No. I'm not changing though, because I can see it. Because again, it's a very close fight, and again,
I'm getting persuasive.
Everyone, I know, man. It's annoying. You're good. But the people talk about hype trains. Jalen had that, but I think people forget.
He's legitimate.
He dropped he dropped Gamrot.
Yeah, yeah,
He lost the
yeah.
fight, but he dropped Gamrot, and
And he wrestled with Gamrot. Like, he
and he
didn't
wrestled
lose
with him.
those wrestling
Exactly.
exchanges. He lost the competition, but he didn't lose the fight. You know,
Yeah.
he pretty much was competitive or winning most grappling exchanges in terms of being able to get to his feet and get out of dangerous spots. So
Yeah.
super high level grappler, and
I'm not gonna let you
grappler.
sway me though.
No,
I'm not gonna let you sway me. I'm sticking to my
I'm gonna
guns.
say Dan Hooker third round TKO.
You know what? I'm gonna go. I definitely a finish, but
And Dan's 6'2".
I'll go third as well.
Dan's
I'll
tall.
go third as well, but yeah, he is. That's why I'm saying it's an interesting matchup because they're both tall and rangy.
Tall.
I'm gonna go third round, but for Jalen, I'm gonna go for a TKO from Jalen in the third round.
We'll
That'll be fun. We'll see.
Obviously,
I'll throw another one.
Go on. Throw at me. All I was going to say is
obviously we can brush over this one. As much as I love Trajan Gore and he doesn't get get the respect he actually deserves. Nickel is it's a whitewash for me.
I don't know why. I don't know what anyone has seen. I'm going to say this. I need to say this on record actually because it's been eating away at me. Because obviously I read comments I go through posts and whatnot, and obviously people comment on my own videos and posts. I don't know what Bo Nickel has done in his career for people to feel as passionately about him being a fraud. I have no idea where people have derived this narrative from. He is one of the most decorated collegiate athletes of all time.
Yeah, he's winning.
He won the Heisman Trophy, which for American terms is essentially the World Cup for collegiate athletes, which is a phenomenal achievement,
isn't he? Really?
Which no one achieves as a college wrestler, by the way. Penn State champion, as good as it gets, Olympic level that we're talking. Comes into Dana White's Contender Series. Just
that triangle transition to the triangle that replays in my head so much.
Come on,
that Mount when he drops him and he sort of sweeps, and Volkanovski did the same thing to Islam actually. He fires that straight right, I believe, and then he sweeps him at the same time.
What?
And then he gets in the mount and he just rolls on his back and switches straight into the triangle effortlessly.
What are we doing here? What are we doing here? When we talk about wrestlers, we say one thing. We say, if you can get them moving backwards, if you can get them on their back. This is a new breed of grappler. Because not only did Bo Nickel manage to get the takedown after a super impressive knockdown, after threatening the level changes, threatening the fakes, threatening the single leg, and then throwing a picture-perfect left hand, which, by the way, is even more awkward for a lot of fighters because you don't often come against wrestlers of that pedigree anyway, but to come against wrestlers of that pedigree from a southpaw stance that a lot of people don't talk about is so awkward to prepare for and almost impossible to prepare for at that standard. And then he voluntarily rolls to his back and locks up a triangle with no adjustments and no change to it, locks it up in his second fight on Dana White's, comes out, wins on debut in UFC. I have no idea what people are seeing that thinks he's going to be a
transition.
No idea.
Speaking from experience, that is just it's doable, but to do it so I can do it, and I'm not going to say I'm the most experienced, in jiu-jitsu, but to do it like that, like in the heat of the moment,
under the lights,
I'm just talking in sparring,
under the lights.
Yeah, exactly. Like he does it like it's just every day. It's just standard procedure, and he's so smooth.
You have to remember with Bo Nickel that he has been doing this. It's such a great story. I remember him saying he went to a wrestling competition when he was 10 years old. He's been doing this since he was about 4 or 5, wrestling at a high level. He went to a wrestling competition when he was 10 years old, and he lost in the final to this kid. He said he came back next year or next week, whenever it was, to the next wrestling tournament, and apparently the same kid was wearing a top saying, "I beat Bo Nickel." This was at 11 years of age, and he would have 100 people standing around his mat watching his match. So he's been under pressure situations and big crowds and packed out arenas and shows for his skills ever since he can remember. He has been forged in fire under the brightest of collegiate lights, which for anyone that knows are so bright in America. And to do it for Penn State and to do it as the captain and to do it at that level, he's really been there and done that at such a level that not a lot of debutants have. So when he comes out with that confidence and that trump card of wrestling, which a lot of people at 185 pounds don't have. And then he's starting to layer in his striking, and his boxing's getting good, and he hits hard, and he's mixing it together. And then he's going out in grappling competitions, and he's going with Gordon Ryan, and he's going 15 minutes, 10 minutes without getting submitted. I know there wasn't leg locks, but still going 10 minutes without getting submitted is seriously impressive. When you have a look at the jiu-jitsu he's adding to his game, and then he's striking. I have no idea what other people see to call him a fraud, but I have him as one of my, if not my, blue chip prospect, and I don't see anything else than a
it's
dominant
common sense,
performance.
really. You have to look at it for how it is. Just look at the accolades, and that just tells you all you need to know.
People are too emotional.
It's not a fake padded record. Yeah, exactly. It's not a fake padded record in regional modes. It's legit, and it's just on. You can look at it on paper, and that's all you need to know of how good he is. And I don't think you need to. It's not really much of a question of whether it transitions to MMA because he's proved that he can do that already. So I completely it'll be dominant.
Second round stoppage for me.
Second round, I'm going to go first.
I'm going to say in the second round, I think in the first round, it's going to be a little bit slower. I don't think he's going to have his way completely with Tresean Gore just for the first exchange. Quite possibly could happen. Very possibly could happen. But the way I see it going is maybe he comes out in the second, he gets another takedown. The thing is, though, as I say that, if he gets one takedown, which is so likely, that's
over, man.
Probably the end of the fight because he's so quick to the next position and he beats you to every position. And the way that he floats the back and floats his hips, you just... he's speaking Mandarin and you just cannot comprehend what he's doing down there, you know?
Yeah.
You're just fresh out of your first lesson of Duolingo. You've just learned how to say ni hao and he's speaking fluent to the locals ordering dim sum. Like, this is just a different level of conversation that Bo Nickal's having in the grappling department. And people can say that they're going to do X, Y, and Z against it. But until you start having that conversation, you're not going to realise. And I think he's going to come out and just get one takedown. And I think that's going to be curtains.
How are you saying it's going?
I think I was going to say second. But in truth, I think he's going to pick a single leg in the first round. I think he's going to be able to just work to a different position. I think he's going to be able to just drag him to the floor, whether it's a body lock or a trip. And I think he's going to be able to get his hooks in somehow, flatten him out, and I think he's going to ground and pound him aggressively with his head against the canvas. And I think he's going to have heavy hips, and I think he's going to go left, right hooks and just Donkey Kong style head through the canvas. And I think he's going to make a statement win, and I think he's going to come out and call a very, very big name out in the top 15 or top 10.
I like that. I'm going to go similar vein, but I'm just going to go with a rear naked choke. I can see him getting the back, just sinking that in. Maybe, I'll go rear naked choke. But equally, yours is an equally good shout. I'm going to throw one more at you because I know the Jack Della Maddalena fight got cancelled, right? Unless I'm mistaken. Which, well, it hurts me, so I don't want to talk about it. Unless he gets a replacement in.
So upset. Yeah. And Kevin Holland needs to fill in for that fight.
I hope so. But my people's main event, my favourite fight on the whole card, Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price. What a banger that is, man. What a banger. So we got two just like, Robbie Lawler, we don't need to talk about what he's done in the sport, but Nico Price is one of my favorite fighters because he's just game as hell. He always has bangers. That is just fireworks. It's two guys who are never going to touch a belt again for Lawler and probably ever for Price. But
this fight, after this fight, this is his retirement fight.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to go out in a bang. He just is. I love that. I think it's just gonna be a stand-up absolute scrap. We're just talking hooks and hooks and hooks. That's just what I'm seeing. So I'm actually gonna go with a Lawler second round KO. Second round KO, why not? Let's go with it.
With most fighters, when they talk about retirement, people say it's one foot out the door and their mind's elsewhere and they're not going to be committed. I think it's going to have the anti-effect for Robbie Ruthless Lawler. I think it's going to be even more of a reason for him to go out on his shield and go out fighting, because that's what this man does. And I watched a video last night about how Robbie Lawler is one of the greatest comeback stories of all time, because he was in the UFC, he knocked out Nick Diaz, and what a lot of people forget is that he got released in his early 20s, went out into another organisation.
He got knocked out by Nick Diaz. Did he not?
Got knocked out by Nick Diaz.
Sorry, yeah.
Got released not long after that, left the organisation, went on an impressive win streak, came back into a vacant welterweight, lost to Hendricks, then came back and then won the title, and then just started having war after war, and is in the Hall of Fame on so many occasions. And I think that's what it's going to be. And I'm glad that you picked this one up because, this is the people's main event. This is going to have a soft spot in everyone's heart. And I can see this. I can see a similar sort of thing. I'm probably going to say that this is going to be quite fast-paced fight, and then I think it's just going to be very grueling, and I think it's going to go 3 rounds with both men just going out.
Yeah, to be fair, I can see
I think it's going to look a little bit like Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold. Is when I look at this fight, that's how I see this going. I think it's going to look like they're both fighting at altitude. You know?
That's actually, I mean, I think they're both going to go for it, and they're both. I mean, to be honest, we talk about how chins can go at 41. I don't know about Lawler's chin disappearing like to that level. Price is always game, so I love that fight. I can't wait for it.
The one that we have
should be on the main card, really.
The one we have to mention, just quickly though, is obviously we've got the Alonzo Menafield and Jimmy Crute rematch, of course, because they had a draw in their first bout. And
oh my gosh, yeah.
First and foremost, fair play to Jimmy Crute because he is as game as they come. Because I personally think
he fought Anthony Smith, didn't he?
Yeah, I personally think he's a super. Not super, that's the wrong word, but just a slightly undersized light heavyweight. He's 6'4", so he's big and he's super athletic, but he's not necessarily the biggest. And I think he always looks a little bit undersized when he's coming up against people. If you come up against people like Jamal Hill, like Johnny Walker, these really big athletic freaks. And although Jimmy Crute does have good wrestling and he does add something a little bit different, I think defensively he can just be a little bit sloppy at times. So I'm hoping that defensively sharpened up because against Alonzo Menafield, who obviously has been to Thailand, worked on his Muay Thai and has just devastating power. He's a freaking
he looks actually very good in
terrifying fighter. So to optionally say, all right, let's go and run that one back after a draw. I mean, fair play because they knocked 7 bells out of each other, to be perfectly honest, last time. And I think this is probably going to... I was shocked it went the decision last time, and I feel like shockingly it might do it again.
You think so?
Yeah, I think...
I'm going to go with the Menafield TKO.
I really think this is just a pick-em fight, to be perfectly honest. I think it's fitting the first one is a draw because I think they both have strengths and weaknesses which complement each other. Obviously, Alonzo Menafield is just so powerful and he's got sharp Muay Thai, but Jimmy Crute does leave holes defensively and you are going to land. But like I said, he's just such a gamer. You can't write him out. But yeah, UFC's freaking fun, man. I am looking forward to this card.
I tell you what I'm not looking forward to is the fight night after that. But we'll come on to
that next week.
We will tell you after that next week.
How long, what's the time on the call? How long have we been on?
We got an hour, about to hit an hour and a half.
Okay, so let's wrap up with one story. Throw a headline at me, and we'll wrap up on. I don't
know if I didn't actually have any. There wasn't much happening this week, really. Besides, I feel like the story was just Sean Strickland being Sean Strickland. 90% of everything I was hearing this week was him saying something completely outrageous, and then doing the same thing the next day.
True.
So yeah, I don't have too much unless you remember.
Not massively. All I will say is just to sort of finish on is. On one hand, you've got Jorge Masvidal signing every and any successful MMA fighter in bare knuckle, paying them an absolute lump sum. I don't know how sustainable it is, but I mean, it's good to see some of these OGs getting paid because you've got the likes of Kenan Barral going back in there. You've got the likes of Junior Dos Santos.
Probably the worst drop-off in UFC history.
Verdum going back in there in bare knuckle boxing. I mean, in terms of having the credentials and having the promotional experience, Jorge Masvidal has every chance of creating a very exciting promotion because a lot of people get into that for the money and try and make something like the UFC and they burn and fail and they don't understand the business or how the game works. But Jorge Masvidal at this point is a vet in the media game, in the fighting game. He's been on internet game since Street Beefs back in the day, equivalent with Kimbo Slice, and he cut his teeth quite literally in bare knuckle when YouTube was first around. So this is a man which has been doing this game forever. So it's quite cool to see actually, and he's making bare knuckles actually making a real big surge, and a lot of people are really having fun watching it and following the sport, and Bare Knuckle FC and Gamebred Promotions are doing great jobs, to be perfectly honest, of putting on great events and exciting events, and big buzz around it. You had McGregor at the
I
last
think that goes with a lot
BKFC,
of
right?
promotions, yeah.
And
Like PFL as well, they're doing very well.
100%.
I like all the things they're doing. They're doing all the right things. A lot of people disagree with that. I actually was on Lucas Tracy's like live debate thing a while
Nice.
ago, and I spoke about that because I just like jumping on that, just chatting shit. Um,
Oh, what? You
spoke to him
just go
about
on
that.
the
He
call
was,
and then just chat with
yeah,
him?
yeah, yeah.
I
Like
might
200
drop him a
people.
message and
It's quite
I'd say
funny.
the same.
Yeah.
That'd be
No,
quite
the thing
fun.
is, if he's live streaming and he's doing the debate thing, he has like a link thing. I just join in there, and he tends to just pick me because I've been on it a couple of times. So
That's funny.
I just have a little laugh out of it. He was disagreeing with me on that about PFL not having any draws. I was like, come on, man.
Got
Like, you know,
Ngannou
obviously
at
they're
the
not
end
the
of
level
the
of the
day.
UFC, but they're doing all the right things. Like,
And the thing, and
this was pre Ngannou, to be fair.
I guess we'll sort of end on this point really, but just in terms of the PFL and what they're doing, I think in terms of having a meritocracy in the fighting game is very enticing to some fighters. I think having structure and consistency. I mean, I was only recently just talking to Don Woodin, and the thing for a lot of fighters is obviously it's very testing having that sort of tournament setup, but it's also very refreshing knowing, okay, I'm going to get paid then. I'm going to fight then, and I have to prepare for then. And they just have that
Yeah,
regularity that not a lot of people offer. And now they're starting to draw big names. And now they're starting to draw big paychecks, and they're starting to put pay-per-views together, and they're starting to draw big
doing
talent
well.
with Dan Hardy on the call, and Francis Ngannou coming over, and Jake
Jake
Paul,
Paul,
and
God's
they're
sake, isn't it?
really
I
big
mean,
moves,
yeah.
and their production's leveling up. I mean, I was fortunate enough to cover the event in London. That was a good show. The production was good.
That's my favorite thing about how they do is their production. I think they do a lot of things better than the UFC in a way.
Really interesting.
I really like the when it's used sparingly and they do it right. It's the referee cam. I
Oh,
really
for
like the way they
sure,
do that.
for
It's
sure.
great.
I think the
Yeah,
exciting thing with the PFL is they're, even though they're a big company and they have a ton of financial backing, the exciting thing about PFL is they're not afraid to be disruptors in the sense of move quickly with innovation, like the ref cam. If that conversation got brought up in the UFC, I feel like it would be a very slow or non-existent conversation for a very long time. Whereas it
yeah,
just sort of was implemented into the PFL and they use it quite often, and it's a
and they
very
don't look back.
nice mix up of just, if nothing else, just putting out social content for their own platforms, if nothing else, because it's a very engaging perspective that you never get to see. And I think they're doing
Exactly.
a lot of really, really good things actually, which I guess is.
Tournament format is always
And they've
great.
got
I'm
they've
a
got a
big fan of
fun
that.
Berlin card coming up next week, which is obviously the European scene. Unfortunately, Dominic Wooden had to pull out because he's got a fractured
It's a shame.
orbital, which is terrible.
Jesus.
Which
Yeah.
came from an accidental headbutt in training, which was so awful to see.
You hate to see it.
But we've got some exciting fights. Lewis
That's the
McGrillen's
fight game, eh?
on that card as well, which I'm pretty pumped for. Always excited to watch him fight because, I mean, he really is one to watch. When you talk about prospects and when you talk about up and coming fighters, Lewis McGrillen is something special. He really is. People talk about the level of competition that he's fought, but he's beaten everyone in front of him and he's done it emphatically. Yes, maybe he should have beaten them because he is better than them. But there is no reason he should go out there and stop people the way he's been stopping them and knocking them off his feet and literally sending them flying backwards. He has devastating power and he knows his strengths and he plays into them and his game's always involving. What people forget is he's actually a grappler. So I'm actually really excited to see Lewis McGrillen in the PFL and see what he can do because it's a huge platform and it's going to have
Yeah, exactly. It's growing.
huge backing.
Yeah.
Like we said, when you have a look at Jake Paul and Better Media, and you have he's got a proper 12 whiskey sponsor now, and he's got that famous left hook that he's knocking people out with, and it's very Conor McGregor-esque, and he's vibrant on the mic, and he's got a great social media following, and he puts good content out, and you're starting to look at a little bit of a new wave, and it's exciting to see what he's going to do in the PFL. So I'm looking forward to that next
Very
week.
much
But
so.
that's a good place to wrap it up. As
I'll leave it
as
there.
always, obviously Leo, it's good to catch up.
Always, mate.
We'll be catching up next Sunday after UFC 290, which is going to be a ridiculous card. So I'm buzzing for that.
Oh god, I'm curious to see how our predictions are because I feel like I might have a stinker. I'm quite happy.
One or the other.
Both gone. Yeah, exactly. We've both gone other way on a lot of these fights.
We're going to be very right and very wrong. In truth,
exactly.
We're going to be very right and very
true.
wrong, but it's going to be exciting to see. But anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for engaging in the content. Follow us on Casuals and Counters on YouTube. Drop us a subscribe for the weekly episode every single Monday where we chat MMA and everything in between. Look after yourselves as always. Casuals and Counters. We're out. Peace.